All
Okay.
right, we're live. All right, Nahid, welcome back.
Thank you. Welcome to you. I have a question for you this time.
Okay,
Are you having a happy money week?
happy Money Week. I'm having I'd say on a scale of 1 to 10, five being middle of the road. I'd say a 6 or 7 Money Week.
Okay. So I bet you and all the listeners who answer this to themselves thought about, okay, how much money did I get in? How much money am I expecting to get in? Basically, you're looking at the evidence
Hmm.
and then decided whether you're going to have a happy money week or not, correct?
Yeah,
Right. And we're going to talk about that today because it's really about flipping that stuff around. You have a happy money week internally
hmm,
first, and then you're going to start bringing that into you, right?
I like it.
Yeah, so that's all about today is, we there's so many different concepts. Whether you want to listen to Honda, I listen to Abraham Hicks and the law of attraction, you probably got your own stuff that you pay attention to, but it's
Yeah.
all about money and money mindset today.
All right, let's talk about it. Let's jump in. So for the folks watching on home or on your computers later on, feel free to post any questions or comments about money and how you deal with it in the comments section, and let us know if you have questions for us specifically. But we're gonna talk about different approaches about money and how we handle it and what's going on with us. And first thing I do want to share, because authenticity is important in my world. In general, I'm kind of low energy today. I think this week has been just really it felt like a long week on Tuesday, and so it's kind of carried through. It's not in a bad way. Just I've been using a lot of energy this week. I've been networking a lot. I had some really cool networking events that have happened this week. Some cool stuff that's been going on, and so that's kind of just drained my energy a bit. So I apologize in advance if I seem a little less energetic than I usually am, but that's just the world works sometimes.
And we're going to forgive you. How's that?
That works.
All right. So I want to just kind of share a few things. Money mindset, that's what I'm known for, right? That's what I have a conversation with people day in and day out. I had a conversation very recently with someone who I just recently met, and I was talking to that person about some of the success stories that my clients have experienced. And I had shared a story about a client very early on who came to me because he wanted to increase his contract rate. So he was a contractor, so he got a consultancy, but so he'd get a contract every so often, and he wanted to go from like 10 to 15,000 to, he said, 50,000. And this is what I do right in the beginning. Every consultation, I take people through a process to help them understand what's the real number. So he thought it was 50,000, and I was sharing with this person, no, it was actually closer to 150,000. So I do a little exercise to get people there. And so the purpose of me having that conversation was just simply to let her know that, hey, look, we have so many limitations that we place on money. It was always 150,000, but he felt uncomfortable sharing that. So he dialed it all the way back down to 50,000. And so this person asked a very legitimate question. And she's like, well, what if he said 50,000 because that's what all he felt he needed to live off of? And that's one of the things what I explained to her is that when I hear people say that they want this, but they've dialed it back down here, it's to me, it's a red flag to say that there's judgment. Because usually that means that there's judgment about wanting more or having more, because there's some kind of fear that if I have more, perhaps I'm taking it away from somebody else, or somehow I'm
Mhm.
not living a very moralistic life. And then when I went on to say that we never say that about love and good health, right? Drew, have you ever heard somebody say, I've got too much love. I really don't need any more good health. I can't take any more because that's not going to mean that I'm a good person. Have you ever heard of it that way?
No, and to be fair, I've never heard that about money either, and not actually said that way. But yes, I've never heard that before.
Okay, well, I'm really glad that you haven't heard that before. But the point is, I hear it all the time when I have these conversations about money. And it's these internal judgments that we don't even realize what we're doing. That's the main part, right? It's not good, it's not bad. We're not judging anybody for having these thoughts. I had them plenty. It's just a matter of understanding what we're doing with the energy if we have these thoughts in a particular way.
Yeah, and to your point, when you have that kind of feeling and you say that or feel that way about something, you're judging yourself based on that. You're stopping the energy, right? You're stopping. You're saying, okay, I have enough. I don't want any more. So stop, right? Um, for me, like I said, I haven't heard it said that way, but the framing that I hear is like, oh well, like I can't ask for that much, can I? You know, or I can't possibly charge that much. Like who can afford that? You know, who's going to pay me that, or who thinks
Yes.
that it's worth that for them, right? And it's like, well, a lot of people do, right? Because it's people are charging it. If there are people out there charging it and making money off of it, that means someone's paying for it. I mean, if you look at, and I do this example a lot, people think like, oh well, I only spend an hour or two with people a month, right? And so, you know, how can I possibly charge whatever I charge for an hour of my time? So then I asked them, like, do you know how long it takes to make an iPhone? And they're like, what do you mean? I'm like, well, how long does it take to make an iPhone? Well, the actual assembly process, I don't know, maybe like 30 minutes, probably, with it, because it's machine built, right? Okay, so how much would you pay for that if you know it takes 30 minutes to build an iPhone? And they're like, well, it's worth this. I'm like, that's not what I asked you. I asked, well, how much you pay for it, right? Whether it's worth that or not is up to you. It's a subjective thing, right? It's delivering a service. It's the value that you get from out of something. That's what the value of it is, not what you would pay for it, right? And so those are two separate questions. And people end up buying iPhones. Obviously, they're really good, really well selling, right? They sell amazingly. So why do people not question that at that point? So we have these rules about it for ourselves. We don't necessarily apply to other things.
Right. And what most people don't realize, because especially if we're talking about business owners who are setting their own prices, they come in thinking that they're using very neutral language, and they'll say something like, I don't know what the market will bear, or I don't think that in my area the market is going to allow me to charge this much, right? What they are not recognizing, again, this is all that internal processing that is so important to be very clear about. What they're really saying to themselves is, I don't believe I am worth this amount. Now, when I mention that to people, they're like, no, 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 I would love to charge this amount. And Drew, you probably have that same thing. They're like, yeah, I would love to get this amount of money. But when they're faced with it, they start
Mm-hmm.
feeling really uncomfortable with it.
Yeah, and I fall into the trap myself. I mean, honestly, like I'm still doing work on myself about money. Honestly, to be honest with you, I mean, the programming that we receive as a child or throughout your life in different ways for around money, around value, around all these things, you know, worthiness, whatever you want to call it, it sticks with you, right? It creates those limiting beliefs. It creates that head trash that you have to get through and to sort through and to kind of organize and identify and then build a strategy to overcome it. Um, you know, I still struggle with that here and there. And so for me, it's something that's like getting over that idea of, you know, oh, you can't possibly charge that much, or even the take a step back and the concept of charging at all, right? Charging money at all for your services or asking for money is not a bad thing because you're still a business owner. You still have to make a living, right? And on the flip side of things, I know for a fact that when I make money, I'm going to spend that money, right? And I'm probably going to spend it with other business owners, right? Whether they're small business owners in the form of a restaurant or whether they're people in my network who I need to get services from and work with. I mean, it's something that it's not like that money's going to sit with me and I'm going to hold on to it and just like, you know, take it with me to the grave, right? Like it's money that's going to come in. And that's something that I actually, a lot of people, how people kind of look at that as well. Like you're not holding on to this money. This money is part of the economy. People spending money, you spending money, you getting money to spend is part of the economy, right? And if you don't have that money, you can't spend it on what you need for yourself either.
Right. And again, kind of to go back to very similar way that Ken Honda speaks about it, money flows in and money flows out. Are you
Mm-hmm.
inviting it in? So generally what happens is we are not inviting it in because we have all these mental blocks. Am I worth this much? Who is going to spend this much on me? How can I convince somebody of my value? So we have all these mental blocks that put us in a place where we feel conflicted. We want more, but we don't want to allow ourselves to get more. And then when we don't get what we want, we're in that place of desperation. And so we then shut down that flow. And if you think of money as being energy, which is a really good way of thinking about it, it has to move. Energy is constantly in motion, right?
Mm-hmm.
But if you stop the flow coming in, then you're too scared that there's too much of a flow going out. And now you're creating that feedback cycle of, okay, I got to hold on. It's a precious resource. You can't get enough of it. So you got to hold on really tightly to it. But as soon as you let go and you realize it comes and it goes and it's always there for you, then you can start relaxing and getting into that happy money mode, right? Where you're feeling good about it, even though you haven't experienced it today. Because how you feel today is what's going to start creating those scenarios and situations where things show up for you tomorrow and the day after. And to your point, everybody's working on their money issues, right? I don't care who that person is. They're billionaires, but they still have a money mindset. We all kind of have to keep going deeper and deeper into that issue.
Absolutely. And as you're talking, I got this visual of like a faucet, right? And you want to take the water's going to your flowing into your hand. The more you try to grasp onto it, the less money or water, if you think about it, is it actually in your hand, right? Because now if you squeeze so tight, the water's not going to get into your hand, and you can't hold it with a fist, right? You have to hold it in your palm.
So come on, tell me, what's the better way? What's a good analogy that we talked about last time that really explains what you just said?
I forgot what we talked about last time already, honestly.
Your energetic sphincter,
Yes, indeed.
which you
Although
were
I don't know if
not.
we want to. I don't know if we want to go with the flow analogy with that per se. That
I
might
know
be the wrong kind of.
it's a very good flow. It's not what you're thinking. Your energetic sphincter is energy flowing through you
Mhm.
and to you, right? In and out. It's gotta go. It's gotta have a place to come in, and it also has to have a place to come out. But you're right, and we get so tense, and we constrict ourselves when it comes to money because we have so many self judgments and beliefs about money. Kind of going back to this idea about what does the market bear. I tell people, when they come to work with me, I charge a certain amount. Now, I work with a business coach who charges double what I charge. And then I also go to my own other energy healing coaching sessions, and they charge probably triple of what I charge. And it has nothing to do with the market. They could care less. Like Tony Robbins could care less what the rest of the coaches out there charge. He knows his value and worth. And he's like, either you accept it or you
Yeah.
go find somebody else. And this is something that I had to work. It took a long time, let's say, to get to this part. So when I first started out working as a coach, I don't come from a coaching background. My background is in finance, so I didn't feel very comfortable charging a lot of money. Back to that self worth, who am I kind of thing. I charged $50. I mean, I used to literally charge $50 a session. But the interesting thing about it is the lower my rate was, the more I attracted people who were also extremely stressed about money. In
Mhm.
other words, it didn't matter how much value they got for $50, they still wanted more. They still weren't satisfied. They still felt it was too expensive for them. And ironically, the more you increase your prices, because it's really your self worth that you're increasing, it goes lockstep and barrel. So as I increase my self worth, and I'm like, no, this is what I charge, the people who come in front of me, I mean, they're paying so much more, but at the same time, they're so satisfied with their value. They are just so happy with the results they're getting. Same thing, but just a different mindset of the people I'm attracting.
Yeah, and it's a different mentality, right? I mean, you mentioned earlier the idea that holding on to it, and what kept coming from me was scarcity, right? It's that scarcity mindset versus the abundance mindset.
Mm-hmm.
People who look at money and energy as abundant, they approach things with abundance. They're saying like, this is something that I need, it's going to benefit me, it's going to help me long term. It's an investment, right? And the people who you're attracting when you're charging $50 an hour, right, for coaching, which is ridiculously low, to be honest with you. I mean, there are groups that charge that much, and that there are apps that charge that much, and that's just ridiculous. But those people they're looking at things with a scarcity mindset, like, oh, it's only worth this because it's. But that's also the value you're going to get out of it, right? If you're only willing to pay $50 for that engagement, for whatever that looks like, for whatever coaching you're getting, or whatever value you're getting out of that, you're going to get what you pay for, right? And people are not necessarily going to value that at anything higher than $50, right? So it's something where you got to value yourself at a certain level, and also know that you can deliver the results. Now, I think that's the second part of this, right? Which is the tougher part. Honestly, it's like being able to deliver those results. If you are not a coach, if you are not a consultant, if you're not an accountant, or not, in the space that you're trying to charge money for, then that's another issue altogether, right? Because I think specifically on coaching, I think this is an issue that's come up for me the last couple of weeks, is that I'm seeing more and more people who are coming out of there calling themselves coaches, right? Who are just not coaches. And there's nothing wrong with not being a coach, but there is if you're saying you are one, right? And I think it destroys the industry to have people like that when they're charging a certain amount and charging a lot of money, and then they're just not able to deliver results, or they're delivering very surface level results. And you and I both know coaching is not a surface level thing, right? There's not a single client that I've worked with where I'm just like, oh yeah, surface level, superficial, we're good to go. It's always at least a couple levels, probably 3 or 4 levels deeper than they actually think they want to go, right?
Right.
And so I think that's the second part of this, which is also like, if you're going to charge for it, know the value, but also know that you actually can deliver the value before you actually try to charge that. I think that's part of that as well, which is if you don't have confidence in your ability to deliver the value, take a look at that and see if that's actually true or not. Probably not true a lot of times, because people think, imposter syndrome, all these different issues people have about their own value, their own self-worth. But sometimes it may be true.
Yeah, no, I agree that you have to be able to come to some level of understanding of what value you provide, right?
Mm-hmm.
Because when you're able to understand that, then you internalize it. But I want to look at this from a slightly different perspective because maybe there are some people out there who are either starting their business or struggling with setting their prices.
Mm-hmm.
So what you said is 100% true, where you are going to get people, if you undervalue your services, you're going to get people who are undervaluing you because you're attracting those kinds of people. So I want you to look at it from the inside. And what I mean by that is everything that you experience in life is nothing more than a mirror within you. So if you've got somebody who's nitpicking about your prices and questioning your value, it more than not is likely that you do not believe in the value that you are giving within yourself. And I'll say this about coaches and therapists, they got to start with work themselves, right? I mean, we are doing work on ourselves on a regular basis. So
Yep.
that's where you want to actually start working because you got to look at it and say, hey, do I want to work with somebody who doesn't trust my services? And then you turn that around. Well, if I'm working with people who are not trusting me and not valuing me, who inside of me is not valuing what I have? Who inside of me is having that critical thoughts, those self critical, judgmental thoughts that say, you're not worth it. This is never going to happen. Nobody's going to pay you this amount of money. Right. And frankly, also you have a hard time coaching because if
Mm-hmm.
you're coaching from a scarcity and mentality kind of place, or if you're delivering services, don't worry about if it's coaching or not. If you're delivering services from that place, you're not going to feel fulfilled, which is not a great place to be.
And it comes across, right? Whether you're aware of it or not, it comes across subconsciously to people. They're
So
like, oh, there's something, they may not be able to articulate what it is, but they're like, something is off about this person, right?
right,
Something's off about the way that they're talking or the way that they're saying their pricing. And it doesn't sound like they're authentic about it, right? That something is just feel like it's not aligned. And until you get comfortable saying that or doing that kind of work or being able to articulate your pricing, whatever industry you're in, whether you're selling products or even services, right? That's going to be an issue, right? And that's going to come up for people, and people are going to keep questioning you on that. And so it's like where the if you look at it as energy again, it's going to be the energy challenging you back to say, okay, hey, get okay with this energy, figure out, make sure that you're in alignment with the energy before you try to put it out there, because you're not going to be able to articulate that effectively. It's a story that I like, which is kind of cool. Tell a story with my clients when I talk to them about pricing, and there's this guy, there's this town basically, and there's a nuclear plant in the town, and the nuclear plant starts from melting down. I'm not sure if I told you the story or not, but there's nuclear plant's like about to just explode. It's gonna go crazy, and they call in this expert from out of town. They fly him in, they get him to there, and they're like, we need your help. You're the only one, you're the expert within like 500 miles. We need you to fix this thing. It's like, all right, cool. He walks around the thing, he looks around, and then he gets a hammer, gets up there, takes a little hammer out, and taps the reactor, and suddenly it stops. Everything is fine. All the alarm bells are gone. Everything's perfectly fine. He's like, I'll send you a bill. He leaves. 2 weeks later, the town gets a bill for $100,000, right? And they're like, what the hell is this? He only came and used a little hammer and tapped one time. He was here for like maybe 30 minutes total. What are we paying for? So they call him, and they're like, hey, you only took the hammer and tapped it one time. What are we paying for? And he's like, the tap was $1, but knowing where to tap, that was $99,999, right? Because you're paying for the experience, you're paying for everything that person brings to the table, all of the expertise, all of the knowledge, all the skills, all the experience that they've had to tell them how to be what they are, that's what you're paying for when you hire a consultant or a coach or a service provider in general, right? Everything that they've done in their professional career comes up for that and contributes to them being who they are.
I love that story, especially since I do tapping. I'm going to steal that story. I have never heard it.
There you go. Now you got one. Especially, and it applies to tapping as well. It says he tapped with a hammer. Sorry.
Right. We're tapping all over, and you got to know where to tap, right? So
Exactly.
it is actually, I love that story. I thought you were going to share a movie inspirational scene or something like that. I'm sure one will come up before we end, though.
I'm sure. One probably will at some point. Yeah.
So let me just ask you, you work a lot with business owners. You've heard some of these things you already mentioned where people are constantly judging themselves. What are some of the things that have helped them transition their thinking from coming to that place where they're saying they're being myopic and they're only seeing really all their flaws, quite frankly, and not seeing the big picture? What are some of the things that either you've used with yourself or with your clients that have helped people in that way?
Well, a couple of things that I use. One is that story, obviously, but the other one is looking at things. I mean, shifting perspective, right? I mean, as you know, as a coach, a lot of what we do is mindset work, and it's also shifting that perspective out of people's heads. The more we're in our heads, the more we keep bumping into all the head trash and stuff we have up there, right? But to get yourself out of your head and start looking at things from a different perspective, look at where you've spent money, right? Look at how you like, and I help them to look at the different opportunities, different situations that they've had where they've paid professionals just because that's the value. That's what the going rate is, or whatever that looks like for them, right? I mean, you go talk about roofers, for example. I have no concept of what a roof costs to make. I don't know what goes into it. I don't know all the details, but I trust that roofing person to know. I trust a couple of different roofing people to know, right? And if cost is really an issue, then set aside a budget. And I love this one video there's a group on YouTube called The Future, which is pretty cool. And they have some really cool things about reframing price, and they do like role plays and stuff like that. Some of which I do with my clients as well. And it's just really cool because they talk about, the role plays in terms of how do they actually deal with those things with the client, and they delve deeper into the client conversations. And honestly, sometimes that client's not ready to make that kind of commitment, and that's okay, But if for example, if you're a marketing consultant, right, and that this potential client has a $500 budget, and for a fact that it's going to cost them $3,000 to build a website, any website of good quality. Are you going to build a website for $500, or are you going to tell them, hey, listen, if this website's not $3,000 important, then you should probably take the $5,000 and put it somewhere else, because you're going to get a website that's not going to be what you need for $500, right? And again, it's understanding that every conversation with a potential client or with a current client is ultimately open for discussion, right? It's not like you have to necessarily deliver on that, and maybe not everyone's your client ideally, right? So it's kind of getting them out of their mind and getting out of the wheel of, the hamster wheel that they're on that keeps putting them in the same circular logic, and getting them to see a little wider picture.
Yeah, absolutely. So I liked what you just said about whether not all clients are always ready to change their rates at that moment. So I have a client, and I mentioned it, I don't know, maybe 2 months ago. I was like, yeah, it really feels like you're in that place where you're ready to raise your rate. And my client was adamant, no, there's no reason for me to raise my rates. And now in May, on my client's terms, not my terms, because it's never going to matter to me whether what I say, on my client's terms, they've decided to make that shift. And sometimes it's just about putting that seed in there for them to be able to see, okay, does it make sense? Does it not make sense? You kind of have to mentally walk yourself. You have to emotionally be there as well, but you kind of have to mentally walk yourself into a greater, more expansive place. And what I really encourage my clients to do is go back and look at their testimonials. I ask them, what is it that is their unique selling proposition, or whatever words that make sense for them. And think about a recent client testimonial where somebody's lives were really transformed. Their business was transformed. Something happened that was meaningful and memorable to them. Because what tends to happen is we focus so much on our flaws that we fail to either see the strengths and skills that we have, or what has happened with some of my other clients is that we minimize things that come easily to us, right? If it's easy to us, that means it doesn't have value. We look at
Right.
other people's skills that we think, oh gosh, I could never do that. And we place so much value on those.
Yeah, absolutely. And to that point, you look at someone like LeBron James, right, or someone like who play basketball. It's not difficult for them to play basketball, right? It may be difficult in competition wise, that kind of thing. Maybe they have challenges, but ultimately to dribble the ball, to shoot, to do what they do, it's not difficult for them. But they get paid a lot of money to do it. So is that just because it's easy for them? Does that mean that get paid less? No, it's not. You're not paid on a difficulty scale. You're paid on a value scale, right? What value do you bring to the equation? And I think the other part of that too is that people don't, especially business owners, newer business owners, don't take time to work with it. They get impatient, right? Like they just want the sale right away. So they don't take time to delve deeper into the conversation with their client in terms of what value can I actually bring to you, right? And what can actually help you realize you're able to do for yourself, and help the client realize on their side that this is something that they need this thing, and two, that there's something that's actually can bring them value long term, that's going to more than pay for itself, right? And that's something that if you take that route and actually help the client say, okay, you know what, this is actually going to help me, it's going to pay for itself in the course of a year or a course of 6 months or whatever. That's a huge step, because then that takes away that whole financial burden question. And you can always restructure things if you want to, right? If your client really can't afford it, and you know that they need this thing, and you can always work with them and say, okay, well, what does it look like to restructure this, and say, okay, you know what, let's do the first month and for free or whatever, or not for free, but delayed payment, not for free, but delay the payment till the end of the month as opposed to the beginning of the month, right? And then go from there and see what happens at that point, or maybe break it up into payments. There's so many ways to restructure things that people don't feel like they have the freedom to do. They think that there's a right way to do a payments, and there's not, right? So that if you really want to work with your client on things, if you really want to make things work for you, you can make your rate work however you want to make it work.
So, as you were talking about what the mistakes that new business owners make, I fell into that category. So, I remember I was writing up stuff for my website, and with EFT, you have practitioners who do everything under the sun with EFT. So, I know a person in Australia who is exclusively a golf performance coach, and he uses EFT for that. You can use it for wellness, anything, right? So, of course, as a brand new EFT practitioner, I'm writing this entire list of things. You can do this, and you can solve that, and you can solve world hunger and cancer too. And I remember looking at it, and I thought to myself, if somebody came to me with this thing, this cure all, this magical thing that I'd never heard of, and they said that it solved everything, well, that's snake oil to me, right? That's what I would be running in the opposite direction. But we are in that place of desperation and that initial exuberance and excitement, and you're like, oh my gosh, I've got this thing, I really want to share it with every single person, right? And we make all these mistakes, which are fine as long as you grow out of it, because I think you kind of have to go through the process to understand what it feels like. And then you can step back and say, okay, now I see where I'm coming from. Now in retrospect, I can see the mindset that I had that was causing all these bottlenecks in these various areas, and why I did what I did, kind of thing. So we've all been in that place, and I would almost argue you kind of have to go through it. Just don't get stuck in it. It doesn't serve you to be stuck in it.
Yeah, I mean, it's part of the path, right? And some people get through it faster. Some people dwell on it for a couple of years. For me, like I went through something similar when I was going through, like, first starting my business and coaching. Is like you want to be able to say, okay, this appeals to everything, and it can help you across no matter where you're at. And as true as that may be, right? It's not going to sell to anybody. It's not going to get appeal to anybody, because it's like, oh, here's this general thing. This helps you no matter what.
Mm-hmm.
Okay, I don't care. Like I just it doesn't speak to me, right? Because I'm not dealing with that. I'm not dealing with no matter what. I'm dealing with certain issues, and you start speaking to my issues now, to what I'm dealing with or what I want to accomplish in my life, and suddenly I'm listening, right? Suddenly I'm like, okay, well, actually that applies. Sounds like me, and now I want to hear it. And that's the value of being specific in terms of not even having necessarily a niche, but having a clear value proposition, right? And it's different from a niche. I think I work with a lot of early coaches who talk about getting a niche. Like, oh, what should my niche be? I keep hearing that I need to have a niche. It's not about having a niche. It's just about it being articulate and being able to clearly define who you can help and how you can help them, right? You don't necessarily have to have a niche if you have a clear value proposition, right? It's helpful it's easier to have a niche and be able to say, I'm not only, but I like to work with this, or I only work with this. If you do really only work with those people or want to work with them, but if you don't, that's okay too. You can also work with a lot of different people and then figure out over time what your niche may or may not be.
Yeah, and I think that when you say what's your value proposition, that comes back to me is that it comes back to your self-worth. It
Mm-hmm.
actually gives you something to be able to say, look, I'm really good at this, right? And it's more about these are the results that I deliver. And I'm saying this tongue in cheek because you don't want to, as a coach, rely on results as being who you are as a coach. I really don't think that anybody can rely on someone else's
Right.
results as being part of their identity. But it gives you that starting point because you don't know where to go when you're brand new. It gives you the starting point to be able to say, look, these are my skills. I may not have worked with a lot of people because I'm brand new, but these are my skills. This is what I'm really good at. Whether it's listening, whether it's asking targeted questions, whatever that happens to be, maybe it's just mirroring back. I'm really good at this, and this is what helps people. Then you can start developing that confidence in that area so that you can say that, yes, that question was worth 99 cents or a dollar, but the right question is worth $999 or whatever it was.
Right. Absolutely. And as you're talking, I keep hearing this question in my head because a lot of people have to go, who's your ideal client? Who's your ideal client? I think the better question to ask is not who's your ideal client. It's who can you help, right? And how can you help them,
Mm-hmm.
right? It's because that's a clearer question. It's like, who do you like to help and who do you help more often? Like, what do you help people with,
Mm-hmm.
right? And that's a different way to reframe it. If you have an idea of who your ideal client is, that's great. But if you don't, then ask yourself, who can you help, right? And how can you help them? And that might be a good way to start instead. So I'm looking
Yeah.
at the time, and we are actually we're over 30 minutes already. Time flies like crazy when you're having fun. But um, as we're wrapping up here, any closing thoughts you want to leave folks with? And if you folks have questions in the meantime, please feel free to throw them in the chat. We can address them. But if not, we'll go ahead and give Nahid a chance to wrap up here.
Yeah, I would really recommend people to start thinking about their money thoughts not in what they have in hand, but what they would like to create and the positive expectation. It's that positive expectation that creates those scenarios, right? If you're stuck in right now lack desperation, you're just going to create more lack and desperation. So take this 1 week to really think about how am I going to change my attitude about money in just for this 1 week and experiment and see what comes out of it.
Yeah, I love that, and I think that's a great practice to start building for yourself. The other thing I like to talk about is the mental bank, and we can talk more about that in the future. But the mental bank is just literally it's you categorize, because as business owners we don't necessarily get paid by hour, we don't get paid by what we do outside of working with clients directly, but everything's revenue generating activities, right? Networking is revenue generating. Working on your business and business plan, or like the new offerings you want to create for yourself. Self-care as a business owner is still revenue generating because you're freeing up your energy to work with clients or doing whatever you do. So the mental bank basically is a list of things. Basically, every night you sit down, set aside 15 minutes, you make a list of everything that you've done that day, right? And you assign a value to it. That's $100 or whatever value you determine your time is worth. You set aside that number of hours, and then one or two items, and you decide those things. Those two items, those two activities are worth double what your normal thing would be, because those are going to be the things that give you the most value. And then you add that up and you create a budget for yourself based on that, not based on whatever actual money coming in or going out, but the activities you're doing for your business and for yourself. And it's a really cool practice. It actually ultimately will change the way you think about money, change the way you think about how you process your activities and what you do as a business owner. It's really, really cool.
I agree. I really like it. I'm going to try that.
Yeah. So everyone, thanks again for tuning in today. Thanks for watching. Those of you who are watching after the fact, really appreciate it. If you guys like the video, please hit the like button, hit subscribe. Please share this to someone if you know someone who's dealing with money issues right now or who wants to get some reframing around that. Please reach out this video to them, or feel free to have them reach out to either one of us or both of us, and we're happy to talk with you guys more about it. But as you guys comment below, please do let us know, how do you deal with money issues? What are your thoughts about money? Where have you felt like you've been held back or holding yourself back with money, with regards to money and achievement and that kind of thing, and worthiness as well? So, need anything before we go?
No, it was a great conversation. I think it's always relevant.
Agreed, especially nowadays, especially as for business owners too. So, Yeah. Thank you guys so much. Take care and stay safe.